Och,
Thank you.
we really look forward to your speech here. And after that, we will listen to our chairman, Lars Adaktusson. But first, Mr. Amir Ohana, please.
Thank you.
To the stage.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, as you know, Israel has many friends, but we don't have too many friends. So for me, it is a great honor and privilege to be here with you, true friends of Israel. And if I may say, particularly because we don't have that many friends working in an environment where it is more difficult, more challenging, as Sweden is considered sometimes to be. So I want to thank you, first of all, thank you for everything that you are doing, not only for Israel, but for justice, for truth. And I want to thank, first of all, Lars Adaktusson, Member of Parliament of the European Parliament, for your great, and of course, Stefan Dossi, where are you, Stefan? For your great leadership and friendship and the way that you move this organization of friendship between Israel and Sweden in the good path. And I want to thank, of course, our honorable ambassador, Mr. Ilan Bendov, the ambassador of Israel in Sweden, that has just recently been appointed, less than a year, but in this less than a year has done so much for contributing to restrain the relationships between Israel and Sweden. And I'm sure, you know what, I hope, and I'm sure, that after the elections in Sweden, you will be able to do even more to do that. Yeah. Now, friends, I understand that not everyone speaks fluent English, so I will try to, first of all, be slowly. And then, do we have someone to interpret? Yes. Yes, we have. So, do I speak fluently or do I stop every few sentences? Fluently. Great. I'll do that. Okay. So I will briefly introduce myself and then talk about the Israeli-Arab conflict, historically and nowadays, what's happening in Gaza, trying to give you answers for questions that you are being asked, I'm sure, and at the last part of my speech, I will open it for Q&A, and I urge you to feel free, not to be Sweden, to ask about anything you want. I promise that I will do my best to answer that, even if it is not politically correct or considered to be politically correct. So feel free. You know the word shalom. Everyone knows the word shalom is the first word that an Israeli says to another once they are meeting. Those of you who participated in the dinner we had last night, the Kabbalat Shabbat, heard the blessing of Shabbat Shalom and the songs in which we are yearning for peace. It is not only since the establishment of the State of Israel, but since the existence of the Jewish people, really. But in order to achieve peace, you need another side that both wants peace and that has the political stability to maintain peace. Unfortunately, we have none. What was it and what is it that still causes our Arab neighbors, not all of them, but the influential majority of them, to try and kill us, eliminate the state? Some would say, oh, it is the occupation of 1967. We will talk about that later, whether it is an occupation or, as I call it, liberation. But one has to know that there was not peace before 1967. The Israeli-Arab conflict did not begin there. What was it that caused the Arab neighbors of the Jewish residents of Hebron and Tzfat to kill, murder 133 Jews in just one weekend of August 1929 in Hebron, Tzfat, other locations, and severely injure hundreds more? What was it? The occupation of 1967? The settlements? Or was it the unwillingness of the Arabs to accept the existence of a Jewish entity? It was not even a state yet, back in 1929, on this land that they considered to be Arab, and historically, as history proves and shows, is the homeland of the Jewish people. You know, when we take a look at what we have around us, we see Hamas on the one side and the PLO on the other. Now, Hamas, I think we will all agree, is totally devoted to the destruction of the state of Israel and the killing of as many Jews as possible. Hamas is a proxy of the Muslim Brotherhood, originally from Egypt. In the Hamas covenant, if you would read it, you will be probably shocked. And you would find in section 7 that they yearn to the day where the rocks and the trees, al-shajjar wal-hajjar in Arabic, would shout, and I quote, "O Muslim, slave of the Lord, there is a Jew behind me, come and slaughter him." A Jew, mind you, not an Israeli. This is how anti-Semitic this covenant is. But they don't only say it, they demonstrate it by deeds. Some of the most horrific terror attacks that we have known came from Hamas. But my colleagues from the left would say, yeah, you're right. About Hamas, we have no debate. But we have the partner. We have the moderate ones, the PLO that we can talk to and we can compromise with. Well, do we? You know, the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, was established back at 1964, which is interesting because back at 1964, there was not one Jewish settler or soldier on Judea and Samaria, or what some call the West Bank. What is it that they wanted to liberate Palestine from? Or rather, should we say, what is Palestine? Is it really Ma'ale Shomron and Otniel, Judea and Samaria, as they say? Or is it really Yafo and Akko and Haifa and Tzfat and Jerusalem and everything that we consider as the state of Israel, the undisputed state of Israel? Now, my colleagues from the left would say, yeah, you're right. That was back in 1964. This is 2018. They moved ahead. They are willing to compromise. Why won't you? Have they? When in every pro-Palestinian demonstration at 2018, I'm not talking about 1964, you would still hear the same old slogan, and you know it very well, because you can hear it in Europe, you can hear it in America, you can even hear it in Israel, because we do cherish the freedom of speech. The same old slogan saying, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." What does it mean? From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. What does it mean? When you take a look at the map, you realize, you see on the one hand, the river, on the other hand, the sea, and then you see the state of Israel in between. Where does it put us? Taking swimming lessons, right? Yeah, the only option we have. Well, we do have an option. And when you listen to the narrative, not only in the demonstrations, but by the high-rank officials of the PLO, when you listen to them in Arabic, not in English, what would you hear? Listen to Abbas Zaki, a very high-rank official of the PLO, on YouTube, 90 seconds, you can all find it, saying on camera, don't say we want to destroy Israel. Don't say it. It is not proper diplomacy. We are talking about the 1967 borders. Now, the Rais, the president, Mahmoud Abbas, knows, and we all know, that once they will withdraw to the 1967 borders, we can take them. But don't say it. The world doesn't want to hear it. And when you realize that this partner for peace is still to this day, not 1964, 2018, paying salaries and bonuses, even to the animals, to the beasts, to the murderers of 3-month-old Hadass Fogel in her bed. Imagine that. They get salaries and bonuses by the Palestinian Authority, not Hamas, the PLO. Is that a partner for peace? By the way, where do they get the money from? What do they produce? What do they sell to the world that they can afford to do that? I think that as European taxpayers, you should ask your politicians that question. Where does our tax money goes to? Let me tell you, by now, they could have paved the walks in Gaza in gold with the money that they got from Europe. What did they do instead? We'll come to that later. And is a partner for peace is one who is naming streets and buildings, like the government building in Ramallah, government building, not just a small alley, is named after Yahya Ayash, aka the engineer, al-Muhandis in Arabic. He is responsible for the killing of more than 100 Israeli women and children and innocent men. Is that a partner for peace? And when you realize that instead of prisoning the terrorists and fighting them, they glorify the terrorist. Once a terror attack is committed, you would find the picture of the terrorist on every wall in his neighborhood being glorified and presented as a hero. Is that a partner for peace? And when you realize that the president of the PA, Mahmoud Abbas, our partner for peace, the moderate one, flies all the way to Turkey to meet and shake hands and accept Amna Mona as the hero of the Palestinian people. You ask yourself, who is Amna Mona, right? Let me tell you who Amna Mona is. Amna Mona is an Arab youngster who chatted in the internet with 16 years old Ofira Khum from the city of Ashkelon. And she tempted him to come and meet her. And as he came, because 16 years old don't think very deep sometimes, she waited for him, promising a romance, and she took him to her place where 2 gunmen was waiting and shot him dead. Now, she was sentenced to life, and she was imprisoned in Israel. And the guards say that sometimes when she wanted to irritate them, she used to mock and imitate Ofir's last screams, laughing at him. This is who Amna Mona is. As you know, a few years ago we had to go to the Gilad Shalit deal, which was very controversial. The state of Israel decided to release more than 1,000 terrorists that we held in order to get our one soldier that was kept in captivity by Hamas in Gaza. It was very painful, but we did it because human lives matter to us. One of them was Amna Mona. The only condition that we have is that this woman cannot stay in Israel. She will have to live somewhere else. So she went to Turkey, where she lives to this day. But shortly after her release, Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen, the president of the PA, flies all the way to Turkey to shake hands with Amna Mona and accept her as the hero of the Palestinian people, a murderer of 16 years old, Ophir Achum. What kind of a people is it that these are their heroes? Can we call them a partner for peace? Now, does it go to every last Arab? No, of course not. Does it go to the majority? I'm not sure. But it goes to the influential majority, which is what counts. And this is the struggle that we are facing as a state. Now, what is going on in Gaza? As you all know, throughout the years, Israeli governments made very significant, very controversial, very disputable moves striving for peace. Because we don't only want peace, we need peace. We are a very small country. And if you would take a look at the map, you would see the tiny, narrow Israel that many of you are familiar with, that is almost 1,000 times smaller in size than the size and territories of the 21 Arab states surrounding us. Now, when you realize that, you understand how bad we need peace. Who wants to sacrifice their future for war? Is war a value? Who wants to sacrifice their children's lives for war? Not we, by all means. But when you realize that when we have decided to sign the Oslo Accords 25 years ago, what the state of Israel basically said is, we want peace. You guys want peace too? Good. Let's have it. You want to rule yourselves? Go ahead. Run your own autonomy. Have your own government, your own parliament, judicial system, education system, police system. This is it. Rule yourselves. Let's live in peace. What did we get instead? You know, not many Israelis know that. Mr. Ambassador, maybe you do. Prior to 1993, Israel never knew the phenomena of suicide bombers. We didn't have them. Ever since 1993, we had them by the hundreds. The victims too. And so instead of achieving peace, when we gave them the chance to rule themselves in an autonomy and gave them uniforms and guns and trainings, saying, okay, you do it, we got a bloodshed we have never known before. Yes, we had wars, we had terror attacks, but it escalated to levels we didn't know. Buses exploding, coffee shops, shopping malls, restaurants. People were dying by the dozens each week. Those of us who lived in that time, and I served in the military in that time, remember we used to open the newspapers looking at the young faces, smiling faces of the victims of the day. Not only we didn't get peace, we got terror, violence, and bloodshed we have never known before. Now, you might expect the Israelis are clever. They probably learned the lesson. You know, they are the startup nation, the high-tech innovation front. They invented the cherry tomatoes, the discount keys, and so on and so forth. Well, no. Then came 2005, in which we have disengaged from the Gaza Strip, or as Prime Minister back then, the late Ariel Sharon, said, we have to end the occupation on Gaza. Now, some of the more optimistic politicians expected that Gaza would become the Singapore of the Middle East. They have a beautiful strip by the shore. They will build hotels, invest in education, healthcare, everything that a normal people who wants to live does. Some of the more skeptical politicians said, well, maybe not Singapore of the Middle East, but at least from that region, we will have quiet. Because once we are no longer there, why would they shoot at us? Why would they attack us? What did we get instead? We got tunnels underneath our villages and missiles that would go further and further to kill more and more Israelis. This is what we have in Gaza. Now, on the aspect of human rights, because, let me tell you a few words about myself. I was born 42 years ago in the southern city of Beersheba. When I turned 18, I joined the military, like many of us in Israel, most of us in Israel, and then spent a total of 12 years in the Israeli Defense Forces, both in the IDF and the Shin Bet, the Israeli Security Agency. At the end of the year 2011, I began my political activity by establishing the LGBT caucus of Likud, which prior to that didn't exist, not only in the Likud, but in any other right-wing party, as happens in many parts of the world. At the end of 2014, I decided to run. We have an open primary system within the Likud, and I was elected as the representative for the Likud of Tel Aviv district. Tel Aviv, Holon, Bat Yam, Yafo, Azor, several cities around Tel Aviv. They elected me. And at the end of the year 2015, I became a member of the Knesset. I'm a member of 5 committees, but the most important one is the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee. Now, going back to the human rights issue, we are often, as you know, being criticized for the way that we treat human rights, right? You hear that before, right? I always ask my colleagues from Europe and America, can you please name one, and I ask you, of course, one human right, just one, that the residents of the Palestinian Authority does not have, that they would have under the Palestinian state, LGBT-wise, women rights-wise, freedom of speech-wise. Can you name one? I mean, what makes anyone think that the 22nd Arab state will be any different from the first 21 Arab states? And what is the status of human rights in those states? Again, LGBT-wise, women rights-wise, freedom of speech-wise, you name it. So how is it that certain politicians who support women's rights and talk very often about women's rights, even here in Sweden, criticize of all the states in the region the one and only democracy in which the chief supreme justice is a woman, the minister of justice is a woman, and she's not the only minister who is a woman, and that had a prime minister, woman, back in the 70s. How is it? She was a very wise woman, by the way, our 4th prime minister, Golda Meir. And she had a saying which demonstrates some of the things I've just said. She said, you know, if the Arabs would lower their weapons, there will be no more war. If the Israelis would lower their weapons, there will be no more Israel. This is the fact. And this is what we are struggling sometimes, many times, more often than not, very much outnumbered against those who criticize and try to provoke and try to demonize Israel. Actually, many of them expect Israel not to defend themselves. They expect Israel to be the only true Christian in the world. This is what they expect from us. And when I see that, and I see the struggle that you are struggling, I am full of awe. And I am really full of appreciation and thank you, because I know it is sometimes not easy, especially maybe in these last few weeks where Hamas decided to declare the return march in Gaza. And what you would see if you would only see European media is innocent demonstrators being shot by the military, right? Well, let me tell you, because I have been there. I have been there many, many years ago, and I have been there recently, in the past few weeks. And I monitor the IDF actions very closely. We have no problem with demonstrators. They can demonstrate, they can shout, they can raise Nazi flags, which they do, as maybe you have seen with the swastika. They can do it. Stay away from our borders. There is a reason why the fence is built there. Because ever since we have left Gaza in 2005, as I told you before, the Gazans are, again, not the majority, but the influential majority of them are deeply engaged with how can we kill more and more Israelis. So the fence is a fence of life. It protects the citizens of our villages around Gaza. The only demand that we have is stay away from the fence. Once they will be successful in breaking the fence and going through it to our villages, we will have to visit many, many families that lost their lives of their dear ones. We are not willing to do that. So the only thing that the IDF is doing back there is keeping people away from the fence. We try to do it with less, of course, פיזור הפגנות. How do you say that? Less lethal weapons. We have them, but when it doesn't work, if you are breaking the fence, know that your lives are in risk. And those who care about the lives of Gazans should demand one thing: have them away from the fence. Have them demonstrate, have them burning Israeli flags, have them raising Nazi flags. Do whatever you want. Stay away from the fence. This is our one and only demand from the residents of Gaza. And you would not hear that usually on European media. You would not see that. But in Israel, there is a very wide consensus. We have the most moral military regarding the challenges and the threats that it faces in the world. Now, it is not only me who says it. When we have colonels and generals coming to learn about counterterrorism and how do we fight terror, and they hear about the amounts of measures that we are taking to not damage any uninvolved population. When they hear that before we throw a bomb on a building in which a missile was shot towards our citizens, and their only target is to kill as many Israeli citizens as they can, we warn them before we bomb it. We have those special bombs of knock on the roof, you know? Knock on the roof. This is how we call it, because it just makes noise. It doesn't kill anyone. And we throw them before. And we publish pages saying this area will be exploded because they were shooting at us from it. So stay away, go away, warning our own enemies. When they hear that, they say, oh, you are really crazy. You are a crazy people. Because they would never do that. But what some can do, Israel cannot do. My friends, will there never be peace? I'm going to say something very unusual, coming from a person that is considered to be pretty hawkish right-wing, that is saying no to the so-called two-state solution, because it's not a solution. And if you would want, I would elaborate on that too. Peace is not only achievable, peace is inevitable. Thank you so much. Thank you. Peace is inevitable based on two major pillars. One would be education, and the second would be economy. When I'm talking about education, what I mean is the incitement to terror has to stop. The paying of salaries and bonuses to murderers has to stop. The glorification and the naming of streets and buildings after terrorists has to stop. And when I'm talking about economy, what I'm talking about is what I see with my own eyes in the industrial zones of Judea and Samaria, in the factories. What I see there, and I'm talking about the very same factories that those who call themselves peace activists wants to boycott. What you would see there, and I urge you in your next visit to come and see that, is Jews and Arabs working together, having lunch together, sharing family pictures, living together rather than killing each other. This is coexistence in the making. This is peace in the making, and this is what they want to boycott in the name of peace. How absurd can it get? Based on those two major pillars, which I believe are possible and are inevitable, we will finally, eventually, throughout, not the years, throughout the generations, because it will take time, I'm not naive, we will eventually have peace, but only that way. Because those attempts to push us to a so-called two-state solution, as if prior to 1967 we had peace, which we didn't, as if the Jewish people are occupiers on a land that for 3,000 years is called Judea. Imagine that. Those attempts not only do not contribute and the recognition of a Palestinian state, which unfortunately Sweden was the only European country to do so far, does not contribute for peace. On the contrary. Why? Because, you see, the reason we don't have peace is not the lack of hope, the lack of future. The reason we don't have peace is the hope. The hope that the Arabs have that one day, if not in one step, step after step after step, the Jews will be away from their homeland. Now, I'm not a very religious person myself, but I do have a tremendous amount of respect for the tradition of my people, for the history of my people. And when I open the Bible, and it is a book telling the story of my people, and I see that more than 80% of the locations stated as the land of Israel are located in Judea, in Samaria, and it is not only written in a book. When you see the historical findings we find in Judea and Samaria from the era of the first temple and the second temple, the Jewish temple, not the Palestinian temple, what you realize is that it is a land that cannot be detached from the Jewish people. Now, are there Arabs there? Of course they are. Will they continue to live there? Of course. No one is going away. And this you have to realize. Some of us have dreams that one day someone will be vaporized. No. but we will have to learn, as I said, how to live together on the same land, which is the one and only solution we have for the future. Thank you very much, and please feel free to ask about any subject you want. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Do you want to manage the questions?
No, we have another microphone there. So.
Oh, this is for the questions. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
This one?
Ja. Så har ni någon fråga? Ja, varsågod. Säg det klart och tydligt.
When listening to you, and plus all I've heard and seen before, I think on my part that a big factor in the whole problem is what I call lies. I call it delusion. I call it deception. And would you comment on my view of it?
Oh, of course, I couldn't agree with you more. Because when I talk to friends of mine and I listen to the ignorance about the history of the conflict, about the motives of the conflict, about the geographic factors that are beyond dispute. I mean, people don't know where Gaza is. People sometimes do not know where Israel is. You want to say something?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Why is the concept of lies and deception and delusion not talked about
Well,
in the pro-Israel media and articles and speeches?
I think there is no doubt in Israeli media that, let me tell you, is pretty far from my opinions. I'm not representing the Israeli media. They are pretty left-wing comparing to me. But still, even for them, it is beyond dispute that we are subjected to bias in the UN, in the international media, when certain politicians claim that we execute Arabs without a trial. You know that quote, right? Yeah. You know, it is a blood label. This is what it is. We act out of self-defense. We defend our citizens. We do that, unfortunately, because we wouldn't have liked to do that. We don't want to do it, but we do it because we have no choice. Now, is it something that is being discussed in European media? I'm afraid not. You are right. But we do our best, and as I said, we are very much outnumbered. And even on the political spectrum, when you understand that the views and the positions of the Arabs have 21 fingers in the UN, at least, because it's a big bloc. So they can recruit more help from countries that maybe normally would not support them. And we have more than one finger, yes, but we are outnumbered even in the UN. But things are changing. When I take a look at the times that we are experiencing at these times, and I am so fortunate to have lived to these days. You know, if someone would ask my great-great-great-grandfather living in Morocco, do you imagine that one day your great-great-great-grandson will be representing the Israeli Knesset, the Israeli parliament in Sweden, or will experience the move of the American embassy to Jerusalem? And not only the American embassy. We have had so far 3 embassies and I want to say a few words about that too. He would have never believed. He wouldn't, in his wildest dreams, think it could be possible. And we had Jews from Morocco to Yemen to Iraq to Russia to Poland to Sweden for 2,000 years of exile, forced exile, that we were away from our homeland, yearning for one same thing. All over the globe where you have Jews, in moments of despair and in the happiest moments of lives, they always had the same wish, the same prayer. Next year in Jerusalem. Imagine that, 2,000 years, year after year after year, next year in Jerusalem, next year in Jerusalem. And we are fortunate enough to live in the times where the Jewish people came back to Jerusalem, never to leave again. And now, it is not only the Israelis who consider Jerusalem to be their internal capital city, sorry. It is also our greatest friend, the leader of the free world, the United States of America. It is very significant. And let me tell you, by the end of this year, I assume we will have more embassies moving to Jerusalem. And with time, I wouldn't hold my breath, but with time, we will have Sweden move their embassy to Jerusalem.
Jag tror att vi ska försöka få en mikrofon till dig, Jörgen. Kan du, Henrik, fixa det? We will soon get the question here.
Israel. Det för inspelningens skull. Ja, jag ska bara kolla att den funkar. Alltså det är bara för inspelningen, ja. Israel has won every war, but is constantly losing the propaganda war. Is that, what can Israel do to at least start gaining territory in the propaganda war?
Thank you. You know, coming back again to Golda Meir, she said that Israel has a secret weapon. It's not a special missile or submarine or air jet. It is the fact that we have nowhere else to go. And this secret weapon allows us to win every war because we cannot afford even one loss. Now, what can we do to win the propaganda war? I was having a speak with about 15 diplomats from Southern America. It was a few months ago in the Knesset. And as you may know, we are having difficulties in South America too. They are sometimes extremely biased towards Israel. And I gave them my beliefs on the conflict, on the ways that the conflict should be resolved eventually, the pillars, education, economy, and so on and so forth. And they were listening very politely. And then they said, you know what? We listened to you, and you are very well with the facts, and you have the history. But do you really think you can convince the world? And I said to them, look, there was one person trying to persuade the world that it is round. And the world said, no, I'm flat. And they struggled with him, the whole world. Eventually, it was Galileo Galilei, of course. Eventually, truth prevails. Eventually. I am, again, not naive. I don't think it will take years. But if you would inspect on the perspective of history, yes, we are still losing in the UN. But you know what? We are losing in smaller numbers than we used to. So there is a change. There is definitely a change in the United States of America towards Israel and its positions. The current president, you know that I have, and I think many Israelis have respect for him, mainly for one reason. He realizes, unlike his predecessor, unlike many European leaders, he realizes that the Israeli-Arab conflict will not be resolved in Washington, nor in Brussels, nor in Oslo. It will only be resolved or not be resolved on the land by the Jews and the Arabs, because we are the ones that would have to live or die with the consequences. And this we respect very highly. Yes, it will be a long struggle. Yes, we are outnumbered. Yes, we are losing some of the battles. But eventually, it is my deep belief that truth will be prevailed, and that historically it is justice for the Jewish people to have a small, just a tiny homeland on the historical state of Israel. It will not be for Jews only. We will have always a significant minority of Arabs, of course. And we will have to learn how to respect each other, how to live with each other. We have no other choice. But this, for me, is the only future I can see for the region. And I hope that we will be able to persuade more and more people who cares about peace, who cares about stability in the region, to understand that Israel is not the problem, Israel is the solution. Thank you. That not only that the settlements are not a barrier to peace, as I said, we didn't have peace before there were settlements. The settlements are the one and only path to peace. Because peace will come not when the influential majority of the Arabs have this hope to throw us out, but once they understand that we are there or here, home, to stay forever. Then we will have peace, and I hope it will come sooner than later. Thank you. This is it.
Great speech, really. I think there are more questions, but I think we have to finish now because of the time. So I think you will also get you will be thanked by a gift here.
Oh,
yes.
I didn't expect that.
Thank you so very, very much.
Thank you, Stefan.
Very, very good speech.
It was my honor, a pleasure. Thank you.
We're very, very, very happy to have you here.
Thank you.
And we have a gift to you.
Ooh, wow, wow.
A famous glass factory in Sweden.
Costa Boda.
Yeah.
What does it mean?
It's a factory.
It's a factory.
Famous factory, Costa Boda.
Thank you very much.
Glass factory.
Thank you all. Thank you for having me. תודה.